Hey y'all, I'm Kim, host of Book Marketing Mania, and I'm so thrilled you're tuning in to learn how to build your audience and reach new readers on podcast. So we've talked the past few weeks about why podcast reviews are so important to podcasters and their listeners, how to leave a written review for other people's podcast. And now, if you are a podcaster, you might be wondering where to find all your reviews, especially if you're hearing from your listeners that they left a review, but you can't see them. And once you do find them, how can you use them to share with potential new listeners and to give the love back to those who took time to review your show? Well, since Apple Podcast or iTunes is the number one place you can leave a written review at the time of this recording, and the number one place every podcaster looks for reviews, you're going to want to start there. When you look at your own show page, you may not see all your written reviews there because Apple only shows you the reviews left by Apple IDs in the same country as you. So like if you're in United States, US, like me, you may not see a podcast review left by someone in another country, but you can log into Apple Podcasts Connect to see all of your reviews. And you may not have logged in there since you first started your podcast. So it's always interesting to look in there, and there's all kinds of other cool stuff about your listeners you can see in there, but we're going to talk about that in another episode. Now, you can also sign up for a free account at chartable.com. That's chartable.com. And they'll send you an email each week with any written reviews you receive from all countries. Now, I do want to give a little PSA that at the time of this recording, after the Apple iOS 17 update, you may notice that some of your reviews disappear. Both reviews for your show and reviews you leave on other people's shows. That happened to me recently, and I had 30 plus reviews disappear that were there between February to now. Luckily, I had screenshots of almost all of them, and I've been talking to Apple on the phone. They've been so helpful to help me try to fix it, and I just noticed they all came back just this week. And it's a common problem that they're hearing from a lot of podcasters, especially after big updates. So hopefully it'll all be fixed whenever you hear this episode, but just know it could happen again with future iOS updates, so don't worry, they will come back. Now, let's talk about what to do with your written reviews you receive from your listeners. If you listened to episode 127, I shared one of the reasons why reviews are so important to podcasters is that it gives you social proof that you have listeners that are getting value out of your show, and that helps you share it with potential new listeners. So take a screenshot of your reviews that listeners have left for your show and share them on social. Put it on your content calendar to share a review every so often, if you're on social media. My favorite way to share reviews myself is here on the show, like this one from my friend Kent Sanders, host of the Profitable Writer podcast. Kent says, marketing is one of the most challenging areas for authors. Kim and her guest break down this topic in detail and help us understand what's working today. If you want to grow your platform as an author, this podcast is a must listen. Oh my gosh, thanks again, Kent. That was such a generous review. And Kent was on a stage at an event last fall for Christian writers, and he shared how to leave a generous podcast review, and he gave my show as an example and showed how he left a review for me. Now, I need to go ask Kent to update it because he didn't include his podcast name, and obviously my audience, like y'all, would love to listen to his show too, since it's the Profitable Writer podcast. Am I right? Kent was also a guest on episode 37 to share about how you can be generous to your peer authors and writers, and I'll be sure to link it in the show notes. It was so good. And if you're liking what you're hearing here on the show, I'd be so grateful if you too took just a minute to leave a written review and let me know what you think of Book Marketing Mania. Okay, you can also add your podcast reviews to your newsletters. As podcasters, we often assume everyone in our community knows we have a podcast, but often that's not the case, so we want to remind them. You might also mention podcast episodes in your email welcome sequence, which you should if you're not. Be sure and add podcast reviews there also. You can add a review to your lead magnet. Say you have a download that's a free chapter of your book. You might also include a podcast episode where they can hear more about your book and include a review there too. You can also add reviews into your blog post because it's a great visual to break up the text. And again, it brings awareness to your reader that you host a podcast. You can add reviews to your website if you have a page dedicated to your podcast, which you should. It's a great way to let your target listeners know you have a resource just for them. So many options, y'all, for sharing the generous reviews you receive from your listeners. And if you're able to tag the listener, it's a win-win for both of you when you share it. So you know how important podcast reviews are. You know how to leave one. You know how to find them and what to do with them. Now, stay tuned because next week we're going to talk about how and when to ask for podcast reviews and how not to do it. I can't wait. Thanks for tuning in today. And as always, I'll be there for you to help you build your audience and reach new readers one podcast at a time. See you then.